What if this unsettling feeling, this restlessness in your soul at 40, isn't a crisis at all, but a doorway? What if everything you're questioning now is actually an invitation to something greater? Have you noticed how society speaks about midlife? As if reaching 40 means bracing for an inevitable breakdown. But what if we've been looking at this transition all wrong? I promise you this. By the end of our journey together, you'll see this threshold not as something to fear, but as the beginning of your most authentic chapter yet. Think of the first half of your life as gathering the ingredients. Now, at 40, you're finally ready to create the meal that truly satisfies your soul. The discomfort you feel isn't random. It's the friction of your deeper self emerging, like a butterfly that must struggle against the cocoon to develop the strength to fly. Carl Jung called this process individuation. The second half of life where we integrate what was left behind, moving toward wholeness rather than achievement or others' expectations. Notice how different this is from your 20s and 30s. Back then, you built your persona, the face you show the world. You crafted an identity around titles, roles, accomplishments. But now, something deeper calls. The persona that once fit so well begins to feel constraining. Your soul whispers that there must be more than the life you've carefully constructed. This awakening often begins with restlessness, a vague dissatisfaction that something essential is missing. You've achieved goals but wonder, is this really what I wanted? Or what I thought I should want? Take a moment. Close your eyes. Can you feel that tension between who you've been and who you're becoming? This is not madness, it's emergence. James Hollis, Jungian analyst, describes this beautifully. The middle passage is about relinquishing the ego's agenda in favor of the soul's requirement. What might your soul be requiring now? Consider the ancient symbol of the phoenix, not just reborn, but transformed through the very flames that consumed its former self. Your discomfort is that transformative fire. What parts of yourself have you left behind in building your life? What dreams did you set aside to be practical? What voice inside you has been waiting patiently to be heard? The midlife threshold appears when the strategies that worked in life's first half no longer serve. The outer achievements no longer nourish the inner hunger. The old map cannot guide you through new territory. This isn't regression, it's evolution. Not crisis, but chrysalis. The symptoms of this awakening might include questioning long-term relationships, feeling trapped in your career, or suddenly finding no joy in things that once satisfied you. Or perhaps it's subtler, waking at 3 a.m. with existential questions, feeling like you're living someone else's life, or experiencing a profound longing for meaning beyond material success. Some find themselves drawn to creativity after decades of practicality. Others question spiritual beliefs or lack thereof. Many begin to face mortality not as a distant concept, but as a clarifying force. Think of it as spiritual gravity. After decades of expanding outward, you begin the journey inward and downward into the rich soil of your authentic being. Marion Woodman describes this as leaving the Father's house, moving from the patriarchal values of achievement and status toward the deeper feminine values of being, connection, and embodied wisdom. Your body often speaks first through symptoms, fatigue, or unexpected emotions. Listen, these aren't obstacles to overcome, but messengers carrying important information about your true path. Have you noticed what your body has been trying to tell you? What emotions rise unexpectedly? These aren't distractions from your life. They are your life speaking its truth. Psychological projection diminishes now. You begin to see how you've blamed others for your disappointments, how you've outsourced responsibility for your fulfillment. This can be painful. Recognizing how much time was spent chasing external validation or living by shoulds rather than authenticity. But this pain carries the seed of liberation. The breaking down of outdated structures creates space for new life. As poet David White asks, what shape waits in the seed of you to grow and spread its branches against a future sky? Take another moment to breathe. Notice what arises when you ask yourself, what have I been avoiding facing? What truth am I ready to acknowledge now? Our culture offers few meaningful rites of passage for this transition. Instead, we're sold sports cars and cosmetic procedures, distractions from the real journey unfolding within. But ancient traditions understood this phase. In many indigenous cultures, the elder wasn't just older, but someone who had faced their shadows and emerged with wisdom to share. Your midlife threshold is not a medical condition to treat, but a spiritual initiation inviting you into elder wisdom, if you have the courage to cross consciously. So how do we transform crisis into awakening? It begins with reframing, seeing symptoms not as problems, but as signals pointing toward authentic becoming. First, honor the grief. There is real loss in this passage, mourning the unlived life, the paths not taken, the youth that doesn't return. Facing this grief honestly creates space for what comes next. Try this practice. Write a letter to your younger self at 20. What would you say? What wisdom would you share? Then write from your 80-year-old self to you now. What guidance emerges? Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield suggests forgiveness practice, forgiving yourself for the choices made with limited consciousness, forgiving others who couldn't give what you needed. This isn't about dismissing real harm, but freeing yourself from carrying resentment into your next chapter. What energetic baggage are you ready to set down? Next, reclaim your projections. Notice where you've placed your power, dreams, or responsibility onto others, partners, children, leaders, institutions. It's time to call that energy home. Psychologist Jean Shinoda Bolen writes about crossing the invisible bridge, moving from external authority to inner wisdom. What would change if you truly trusted your inner knowing? Begin archaeological excavation of abandoned dreams and disowned parts. What fascinated you as a child? What talents remained undeveloped? What aspects of yourself seemed too threatening to express? A client once told me she'd always wanted to paint but believed she wasn't artistic enough. At 45, she finally began. The art itself wasn't the point. It was reclaiming her right to creative expression. Another discovered that his financial success had come at the cost of deeper values. He didn't abandon his career, but realigned it with environmental concerns that had called him since childhood. Shadow integration becomes essential now. The shadow contains not just what we judge as negative, but also our unlived potential, the gold we've been afraid to claim. Ask yourself, what qualities do I most strongly judge in others? These often point to disowned aspects of yourself, both negative traits and positive capacities too threatening to acknowledge. A woman who prided herself on selfless caregiving discovered rage she'd suppressed for decades. By acknowledging this energy, she found healthy boundaries and authentic power she'd never allowed herself. A man who built his identity on rational thinking found himself inexplicably drawn to poetry. His analytical mind had served him well, but his soul needed metaphor and mystery to feel whole. Thomas More writes that this passage requires care of the soul, tending to the deeper dimensions beyond ego achievement. This means creating space for reflection, feeling, and symbolic thinking. Consider starting a dream journal, as dreams often intensify during this threshold. They bypass your conscious defenses, showing what's really happening in your psyche. One powerful practice is creating a council of elders in your imagination, wise figures from history, literature, or your personal life. What guidance would they offer for your current crossroads? Remember that this journey isn't linear. You'll experience breakthroughs followed by regression, clarity followed by confusion. This rhythm of expansion and contraction is the heartbeat of transformation. What helps most is community, not just any social connection, but authentic relationships where your emerging self is witnessed and held. Who sees you not just as you've been, but as you're becoming. Nature becomes a powerful ally. Time and wilderness can dissolve artificial boundaries and reconnect you with cyclical wisdom. Trees don't apologize for shedding leaves or growing more slowly with age. Consider marking this threshold with ritual, perhaps a solo retreat, a symbolic release of what's complete, or a conscious claiming of your emerging identity. How might you honor this crossing? Remember that humor and lightness are essential companions. This work is serious, but needn't be somber. Can you laugh gently at the identities you've outgrown while honoring how they served you? Physical practices ground this transformation. Your body isn't separate from your spiritual awakening, but is its very vehicle. How does your emerging self want to move differently in the world? One executive found that after decades at a desk, his body craved dance. Another discovered that gentle yoga replaced the competitive sports that once defined him. Your body knows what supports this transition. Marie-Louise von Franz, Jung's colleague, noted that in midlife, we must find meaning not from cultural standards, but from within. What values emerge when you listen to your deepest knowing? This isn't about perfection or spiritual bypassing. Integration means embracing your humanity, your wounds, limitations, and contradictions, while recognizing the consciousness that holds them all. As philosopher Martin Buber said, all journeys have secret destinations of which the traveler is unaware. Your awakening will likely lead somewhere unexpected, more authentic than you can now imagine. Breathe again. Feel the presence of your future self. the one who has moved through this threshold with consciousness. What quality of being radiates from this wiser version of you? Let's gather the threads of this journey. We've explored how the midlife threshold, often mislabeled as crisis, actually represents an invitation to wholeness and authenticity. We've seen how the structures and strategies that served your first half of life naturally fall away, creating necessary disorientation that precedes deeper wisdom and alignment. We've discovered practical approaches, honoring grief, reclaiming projections, integrating shadow, finding community, and creating meaningful ritual to consciously cross this threshold. Remember that this awakening isn't about becoming someone new, but rather uncovering who you've always been beneath the adaptations and accommodations of your earlier years. Your task now isn't perfection, but presence, showing up with increasing authenticity for the second half of life, where meaning emerges from being rather than endless doing. Today, I invite you to take one small step toward conscious crossing. Perhaps journal about what's calling you forward, or simply sit in silence with the question, what wants to emerge through me now? Trust the wisdom of this threshold. The very discomfort you feel contains the energy for your transformation, not into some idealized version of yourself, but into the singular, imperfect, authentic human you were born to become.